"Who's your daddy, trainee?" The voice cut through the frigid Pacific surf like a serrated knife, carving into the raw, exposed nerves of every man shivering on the beach. "I asked you a question." 134. Senior Chief Petty Officer Gunnarsen stood over them. A 5'10" monolith of granite and pure, distilled malice. His shadow fell across Ryder, who was struggling to hold up his end of the 30-foot, 300-pound telephone pole they called Cindy. The wet sand sucked at their boots. The cold gnawed at their bones, but it was Gunnarsen's voice that made them want to die. "You got some admiral in the Pentagon pulling strings for you, Ryder. Is that it? You think a famous last name gets you a pass through my butt OS?" Alex's arm screamed, muscles tearing, ligaments groaning. He gritted his teeth, the salt spray stinging his eyes. He didn't answer. He couldn't. All his oxygen was being used to fuel the fire in his shoulders. "Answer me." Gunnarsen kicked a spray of sand into Alex's face. "The rest of you tadpoles can thank Mr. Ryder here for the extra quality time we're about to spend with the Pacific. You want to be a legacy, son? You gotta earn it in blood and sweat, not on your daddy's letterhead." The other 5 men in Alex's boat crew groaned. It was the 3rd time that morning Gunnarsen had singled out Alex, and the 3rd time they were all paying the price for it. They were being punished for a ghost for a name Alex had tried to leave behind the moment he stepped onto the asphalt of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. "Drop it!" Gunnarsen roared. The log crashed into the churning surf, sending a shock wave through the water. "On your backs!" They fell back into the icy water, the shock of it stealing their breath. The waves crashed over them, filling their mouths and noses with salt water and sand. "Now get up!" They scrambled to their feet, sputtering, freezing. "You are cold," Gunnarsen said, his voice deceptively calm. "You are miserable, you are weak, and you are thinking about that warm, dry bell." He pointed a thick finger toward the brass bell hanging in the center of the compound. "The bell of shame. Ring it 3 times, and you're out. No more cold, no more pain, no more sealed dreams. Just a bus ticket back to whatever pathetic life you came from." "Ryder," Gunnarsen said, his face inches from Alex's. His breath smelled of stale coffee and contempt. "I'm going to make you ring that bell. I'm going to break you. And send you home crying to daddy. You don't belong here." Alex stared back, his eyes a defiant blue against the gray morning. He didn't say a word, he just held the senior chief's gaze. In that moment, a silent war was declared. It wasn't about becoming a SEAL anymore, it was about survival. Gunnarsen saw a privileged kid coasting on a name. Alex saw a gatekeeper who had to be conquered. And between them lay hundreds of hours of the most brutal military training ever devised by man, a meat grinder designed to find the 1% who refused to break. The real test was just beginning. But AS wasn't training, it was a process of elimination. A relentless, soul-crushing filter designed to strip away everything a man thought he was. And see what, if anything, was left underneath. The days bled into one another in a monotonous cycle of pain. Log PT on the beach, where every lift was a symphony of agony. Runs in the soft sand, carrying the heavy IBS boats on their heads until their necks compressed and their legs turned to jelly. And the water, always the water. Surf passage, where the waves would hold them under, tumbling them like laundry, stealing their air, their orientation, their will to live. Through it all, Senior Chief Gunnarsen was the conductor of their misery, and Alex was his favorite instrument. He never laid a hand on him, but his words were more damaging than any punch. He'd find the smallest imperfection or scuff on a boot, a moment of hesitation, and magnify it into a cardinal sin, and the punishment was always collective. "Ryder, your gear isn't staged properly. It seems your boat crew enjoys being wet and sandy. Hit the surf." The other men in his boat Krupico, a quiet, tough-as-nails kid from East LA. Jensen, a giant farm boy from Iowa. And the other started to look at Alex with a mixture of pity and resentment. He was the lightning rod, and they were getting caught in the storm. Alex tried to be perfect, to be invisible, but it was impossible. Gunnarsen wanted a target, and Alex's phantom legacy made him the perfect one. He ate alone when he could. He spoke only when necessary. The isolation was a different kind of cold, one that seeped deeper than the Pacific. He wrote letters home to APO Box, never mentioning his father, never speaking of the crucible he was in. His father, Admiral Bull Ryder, was a legend. A plank owner of SEAL Team 6, a hero of a dozen forgotten conflicts. His shadow was so vast, Alex had felt like he'd been living in twilight his entire life. Joining the Navy, going for the teams, it was supposed to be his sunrise, his own light. But here, in the one place he thought he could be just a man, his father's shadow was longer and darker than ever. The only one who seemed to cut through the isolation was Paco Ramirez. One evening, as they were cleaning their rifles, a mandatory 4-hour ritual of meticulous care, Paco sat down next to him. "He's trying to get in your head, man," Paco said, not looking up from the bolt carrier group he was polishing. "Don't let him." "He's getting to all of us," Alex replied, his voice raspy from shouting all day. "Yeah, but he's aiming at you. He thinks you're a silver spooner. Thinks you'll crack and run home." Paco finally looked at him, his dark eyes serious. "Don't give him the satisfaction. You ain't your dad. You're just Ryder, boat crew 3. That's all that matters here." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged the unspoken truth without judgment. It was a lifeline. From then on, a quiet bond formed between them. They'd share a protein bar, help each other with a knot, offer a simple nod of encouragement when Gunnarsen was on the warpath. It was a small alliance in a world of pain, but it was enough. Then came Hell Week, 5.5 days of continuous training with a total of 4 hours of sleep. It was a waking nightmare. They ran more than 200 miles. They did thousands of push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups. They spent hours sitting in the cold surf, their bodies shaking uncontrollably, a condition the instructors called hyperthermic convulsions. Men started to quit. The ringing of the bell became a constant, mournful sound in the compound. Good men, strong men, broken. On the 4th night, during a long, grueling paddle in their ibs, Alex started to hallucinate. He saw demons dancing in the waves. He heard his father's voice in the wind, telling him he was a disappointment. He felt his grip on the paddle loosen. He was done. Every fiber of his being screamed for it to end. Then he felt a sharp nudge in his ribs. It was Paco. "Stay with me, bro," Paco grunted, his own face a pale, gaunt mask in the moonlight. "Just one more paddle stroke. Then one more. That's all. We do this together." Alex looked at Paco, then at the other men in the boat. Their faces were etched with the same exhaustion, the same agony. And yet, they were still paddling for each other. He wasn't just Alex Ryder, the Admiral's son. He was a gear in a machine, a part of boat crew 3. He gripped his paddle tighter and dug it into the black water. He would not be the one to fail them. Gunnarsen could take his body, but he wouldn't take his team. The final hurdle of second phase, the dive phase, was called pool competency. It was a test of not just skill, but of pure grit and the ability to remain calm in the face of mortal panic. The task was deceptively simple. Trainees, in full scuba gear, would be subjected to a series of attacks by instructors in the deep end of the training pool. The instructors would rip off their masks, tie their breathing hoses in knots, and turn off their air supply. The trainees' job was to calmly, methodically, solve each problem without surfacing. It was a choreographed drowning, a test of who could find their zen at the bottom of a 9-foot pool while their lungs burned for air. Gunnarsen himself was supervising Alex's boat crew. He stood on the pool deck, stopwatch in hand, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, watching them like a hawk circling its prey. One by one, the trainees went through the evolution. Jensen, the big farm boy, breezed through it, his massive lung capacity an unfair advantage. 2 others passed, their movements shaky but successful. Then it was Paco's turn. He gave Alex a quick, confident nod and descended into the blue haze. The instructor, a burly first-class petty officer, descended on him like a shark. He ripped Paco's regulator out of his mouth, tore off his mask, and spun him around, tangling his hoses. Paco, a stream of bubbles escaping his lips, began the slow, methodical process of untangling himself. He retrieved his regulator, cleared it, and took a breath. He was doing fine. Then the instructor added a new twist. He unbuckled Paco's weight belt and wrapped it around his air tank, completely fouling his gear. It was a brutal, unexpected problem. Paco started to work on it, but Alex could see the change from the side of the pool. The smooth, calm movements became jerky. The small, controlled bubble streams became frantic bursts. Panic was setting in. Underwater, a minute feels like an hour. Paco was running out of air, and the complex problem was getting worse. He was getting tangled, his arms and legs flailing. He wasn't solving the problem anymore. He was just fighting. He was drowning. On the deck, Gunnarsen's voice was like ice. "Hold your position, Ryder. Let him work the problem. This is the test." A safety diver was in the pool, but he was on the far side, observing another trainee. He hadn't seen the shift in Paco's struggle. Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew the protocol. Don't interfere. Let the safeties do their job. Interfering was an automatic failure, but Paco had stopped moving. His body went limp, a slow, final stream of bubbles rising to the surface. He'd blacked out. He was seconds from a fatal embolism or drowning. "Senior Chief, he's out," Alex yelled, his voice cracking. "I said hold your position," Gunnarsen barked, his eyes locked on the stopwatch. "He has 10 more seconds to solve it. 10 seconds, an eternity, a death sentence." In that split second, Alex saw two futures. One where he obeyed, stood by, and watched his friend die or suffer permanent brain damage. One where he failed the evolution, threw away his dream, but saved the man who'd helped him through Hell Week. It wasn't a choice. He broke from the lineup, dove into the pool, and kicked hard toward Paco's sinking form. The water was a blur. He reached Paco in seconds, his own training taking over. He ripped the tangled weight belt off the tank, turned on Paco's emergency pony bottle, and shoved the regulator into his friend's mouth. Then he wrapped his arms around Paco's chest and kicked for the surface, ascending in a controlled explosion of motion. They broke the surface with a gasp. Alex dragged Paco to the edge of the pool, where other instructors, now alerted, helped haul him out. Paco was unconscious, his skin a deathly blue. Alex immediately began CPR, compressing his friend's chest with a brutal, rhythmic efficiency. 1 and 2 and 3 and, he counted out loud, his mind a void of everything but the task. After the second cycle of compressions and breaths, Paco coughed violently, spewing a lungful of water onto the deck. His eyes fluttered open, confused and terrified. He was alive. Alex slumped back, his adrenaline crashing. He had done it. He'd saved him. He looked up, expecting. He didn't know what. A nod, a grudging thank you. He looked right into the cold, furious eyes of Senior Chief Gunnarsen. "Get on your feet, Ryder," Gunnarsen said, his voice quiet, which was far more terrifying than his roar. Alex staggered to his feet, his body trembling. "You are a failure," Gunnarsen stated, as if reading from a weather report. "You panicked. You failed to follow a direct order. You interfered with a training evolution. You endangered yourself and the instructors. You have failed pool competency." He paused, letting the words hang in the silent air. "Pack your bags. You're being rolled back, if you're lucky. More likely, you're done here. I told you I'd break you. Now get out of my sight." The commanding officer of the Bud AS Training Center was a grizzled captain with eyes that had seen too many sun-bleached war zones. He looked at the report on his desk, then at Alex, who stood at attention in front of him. "Senior Chief Gunnarsen's report says you're a liability," the captain said, his voice neutral. "Says you can't follow orders under pressure. That you're a danger to yourself and your team." He leaned back in his chair. "But the report from the base corpsman says that if you had waited another 30 seconds, Petty Officer Ramirez would have been a casualty. A training death. That's a lot of paperwork. Worse, it's a good man gone." Alex remained silent. His fate was being decided in this sterile, air-conditioned office, a world away from the sand and the surf. "What do you have to say for yourself, trainee?" "I saw my teammate drowning, sir," Alex said, his voice steady. "I acted to save his life. I accept the consequences." The captain studied him for a long moment. "Gunnarsen is one of the best instructors we've ever had. He turns boys into stone-cold operators. He believes that the protocol is there for a reason. In a real-world scenario, breaking protocol could get your whole team killed. He believes you failed the ultimate test, the test of discipline," the captain sighed. "But this wasn't a real-world scenario. It was a controlled environment where a man was dying. You broke a rule, but you upheld an unwritten one. You never, ever leave a man behind." He picked up a stamp and slammed it down on Alex's file. "You're rolled back. You'll join the next class and start second phase over from the beginning. Don't make me regret this. Don't make Senior Chief Gunnarsen write about you." "Hooyah, Captain," Alex said, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He wasn't out, he had another chance. Starting over was a unique form of hell. He had to watch what was left of his original class, including a fully recovered Paco, move on without him. He was now the outsider, the rollback, viewed with suspicion by the new trainees in his class, but something had changed in him. Gunnarsen's fury, the near death of his friend, the gut-wrenching decision, it had burned away the last of his fear. He'd faced the worst and hadn't broken. He put his head down and did the work. He was the first to volunteer for the worst tasks, the last to complain. He helped the new trainees, showing them the tricks he'd learned. He endured Gunnarsen's continued scrutiny, but now the senior chief's words were just noise. They had no power over him. 6 months later, Alex stood on the grinder, the hallowed asphalt parade ground of the Buddy S compound. He was wearing his dress whites, the salt and sand finally washed away. The sun was warm on his face. An instructor pinned the golden seal trident on his chest. He had done it. He had graduated. As he looked out at the small crowd of families, he saw Paco, who gave him a sharp, proud nod. He did not see his father. He hadn't told him. This victory was his alone. He had survived the crucible, not as an admiral's son, but as Alex Ryder, and now, the real war was about to begin. SEAL Team 4, based at Joint Expeditionary Base Little Creek in Virginia Beach, smelled of salt marsh, diesel fuel, and cordite. It was a world of concrete buildings, steel containers, and men who moved with a quiet, lethal purpose. For a new guy, or FNG, it was like being a freshman in a school for sharks. You kept your mouth shut, your eyes open, and you did every menial task imaginable, from cleaning weapons to sweeping the platoon spaces, hoping to absorb a fraction of the experience that surrounded you. Alex's new platoon was Alpha Platoon. The lead chief was a man named Rook Martinez. Rook was a legend in the teams, a combat-hardened operator with a chest full of medals he never talked about and scars that told stories he'd never share. He was short, built like a fire hydrant, and had a gaze that seemed to peel back your skin and inspect your soul for weakness. Rook knew exactly who Alex was. The community was too small for secrets like that, and he was deeply skeptical. He'd seen legacies before. Some were phenomenal. Others were political animals, using their connections to climb the ladder, often at the expense of the men around them. Rook called them Blue Falcons, and he had a zero-tolerance policy for them. The clash came during the planning for Operation Serpent's Tooth. The mission was to capture a high-value Al-Shabaab leader hiding in a fortified village in rural Somalia. Intel from a local informant asset Rook had cultivated for years pinpointed the HVT's location in a specific compound. Rook's plan was classic SEAL tactics, a night insertion by helicopter, a quiet foot patrol to the target, and a dynamic entry, simple, brutal, effective. It was a plan based on his gut and his trust in his source. During the mission brief, the platoon commander, a young lieutenant fresh from the academy, deferred to Rook's experience. But Alex, who had been tasked with analyzing signals intelligence from the area, saw something that didn't fit. "Chief," Alex said, his voice quiet but clear, breaking the unwritten rule that FNGs don't speak in briefings, permission to speak. Rook's eyes narrowed. The whole room went silent. "What is it, new guy?" "The sergeant is weird," Alex said, pushing a tablet across the table. "Look at the cellular activity around the target compound. It's almost zero. A village of 200 people, and nobody's making calls. It's a communications blackout." "They know we listen, kid," Rook grunted. "Standard procedure." "Maybe," Alex countered, growing more confident. "But I cross-referenced that with recent drone imagery. There's a wadi, a dry riverbed, about 500 meters west of the village. The informant says it's impassable, but the thermal imagery from last night shows faint heat signatures. Vehicle tracks, and this morning, they're gone. Someone is using it. And this is the problem." He zoomed in on another screen. "I ran a passive scan for encrypted radio signals. There's a low-power, burst transmission network active around that wadi. It's not local traffic, it's military-grade encryption. They're talking to each other, they're coordinating." Rook stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. "What are you saying, Ryder?" "That my guy, who's been solid for 3 tours, is setting us up. I'm saying the data suggests the target isn't in the village," Alex said firmly. "The village is the bait. The real action, the command and control, is in that wadi. They're pulling us into a kill box. A tense silence filled the room. The young lieutenant looked from his seasoned chief to the FNG with his screens of data. It was the old way versus the new way. The operator's gut versus the algorithm. "This is video game crap," Ryder, Rook said, his voice laced with venom. "We don't win fights by staring at pixels. We win by putting boots on the ground and steel on target. We go with the plan. The informant is good." He looked at the lieutenant. "My guy has never been wrong." The lieutenant, caught in the crossfire, made the safe call. He sided with experience. "We stick to the primary plan, Chief. Ryder, your concerns are noted. Stay on that, Sergeant. Let us know if anything changes." The message was clear. Shut up and do your job. Alex felt a cold dread wash over him. They were walking into a meat grinder. And he was the only one who saw the teeth. Alex couldn't let it go. For the next 48 hours, during the final mission preparations, he lived on caffeine and a growing sense of panic. While the rest of the platoon checked their gear, test-fired their rifles, and mentally prepared for the raid, Alex was glued to his screen, deep in a digital rabbit hole. It was a clear breach of protocol. He was supposed to be supporting the approved plan, not trying to build a case against it. He pushed the boundaries of his authority, tasking a satellite for a high-resolution sweep of the wadi and using experimental SIGIN software to try and crack the low-level encryption on the enemy radio traffic. He knew if he was caught, his career as a SEAL would be over before it even started. Rook would see it as the ultimate act of a Blue Falcon going behind the team's back. Then, just 6 hours before they were scheduled to launch, he found it. The software managed to decrypt a single, 7-word data burst from the wadi. It wasn't much, but it was everything. "The banquet is set. Await the guests." His blood ran cold. It was the confirmation. A banquet, an ambush. They were the guests. He grabbed his laptop and burst into the final mission brief. Rook, the lieutenant, and the rest of the platoon were gathered around a sand table, finalizing the assault plan. "Stop," Alex yelled, his voice strained. Everyone turned to look at him, stunned. "Ryder, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Rook snarled, taking a menacing step toward him. "You are out of line." "Chief, you have to see this," Alex pleaded, pushing his laptop in front of the lieutenant. "I broke the encryption. It's a trap. The informant sold us out. The banquet is set. Await the guests. They're waiting for us in the village." Rook's face turned purple with rage. "You went behind my back. You disobeyed a direct order. You're trying to scrub this mission because you're scared, kid. I knew you didn't have the stomach for this." The lieutenant looked at the screen, then at Rook's furious face, then at Alex's desperate one. The entire operation, months of planning, hung in the balance. His command rested on this single decision. "Show me the raw data, Ryder," the lieutenant said, his voice suddenly calm and authoritative. Alex quickly brought up the signals analysis, the satellite imagery of the hidden vehicle tracks, the location of the burst transmission. He laid out the digital breadcrumbs one by one. It was no longer a theory, it was evidence. The lieutenant stared at the data, his jaw tight. He looked at Rook, whose anger was slowly being replaced by a dawning, horrifying realization. His gut had been wrong, his asset had turned. "The mission is not scrubbed," the lieutenant announced, his voice ringing with newfound command. "It's changed." He looked at his men. "They're expecting us to come through the front door. So we're going to knock, but we're not going inside." He turned to Rook. "Chief, you're taking your fire team and making a hard and loud approach to the village, just like they expect. You'll be the diversion. Draw their fire. Make them think their trap has been sprung." Then, he looked at Alex. "Ryder, you're with me. You're going to guide us, in real time, using your SIGINT. You're going to walk the main assault element, quiet as ghosts, right into that wadi. You're going to take us to their back door." He took a deep breath. "We're not going to the banquet, we're going to crash the kitchen." The Somali night was absolute black, a moonless, starless void. Two Black Hawk helicopters flew low and fast over the scrubland, their rotors beating a muffled rhythm against the oppressive silence. Inside, there was no talk, just the quiet click of gear and the hum of the comms. Alex sat hunched over his tablet, his face illuminated by the eerie green glow of the screen. His heart was a trip hammer in his chest. His theory was about to be put to the ultimate test. The helicopter split. Rook's team fast-roped down to miles east of the village, beginning their loud, deliberate approach. Alex, the lieutenant, and the main assault force inserted 3 miles west, melting into the darkness near the wadi. "Talk to me, Ryder," the lieutenant whispered into his headset. "They're moving," Alex breathed, watching the encrypted signals dance on his screen. "Rook's diversion is working. They're shifting all their forces to the eastern side of the village. They're manning the machine gun nests. The wadi, it's almost empty. They've left only a skeleton crew on their command post." For the next hour, Alex became the eyes and ears of the team. He was no longer the FNG, he was their guide through the minefield. "Hold," he'd whisper, "2-man patrol moving 50 meters ahead of your position." The team would freeze, becoming part of the landscape, until he gave the all-clear. "Okay, you're clear to move. The entrance to the wadi is 100 meters northwest. There's a single sentry at the mouth." They moved with a terrifying silence, a dozen lethal shadows flowing over the terrain. They eliminated the sentry without a sound. As they crept into the wadi, they found what Alex had predicted, a hidden command post dug into the side of the ravine, camouflaged with netting. Inside, illuminated by the glow of laptops and radios, was their high-value target, directing the ambush, completely unaware that death was standing right outside his door. Just as the lieutenant gave the signal to breach, the night erupted to the east. Rook's team had engaged the village. The trap was sprung. Breach, breach, breach. The assault on the command post was over in 7 seconds. A storm of controlled violence. The HVT was captured, his command team neutralized. "Serpent is in the bag," the lieutenant said calmly over the comms. "All teams, collapse and extract." The mission had been flawless. They had walked into the enemy's headquarters, snatched their leader, and were gone before the ambush force in the village even knew what had happened. They had turned a deadly trap into a spectacular victory, all because of the video game crap. Back on the helicopter, nobody said a word. The adrenaline was still pumping. As the sun began to bleed over the horizon, Rook made his way over to Alex. He stood in front of him for a long moment, his face unreadable in the dim light. Then, he unstrapped the custom-made combat knife from his vest. It was worn, scarred, a tool that had clearly seen heavy use. He held it out to Alex. "Never thought I'd say this, kid," Rook said, his voice a low rumble over the engine noise. "But you've got the gut of an operator, even if it's connected to a keyboard." Alex took the knife. It was the heaviest thing he had ever held. It was more than a weapon. It was an apology. It was respect. It was acceptance. He was no longer the FNG. He was a brother. The debrief back in Virginia Beach was a case study in the new face of warfare. Alex's data, Rook's diversion, the lieutenant's decisive leadership, it became a template for future operations. The failed informant was a footnote, the successful integration of technology and tactics was the headline. Alex Ryder, the FNG, was now Alex Ryder, the guy who had saved Alpha Platoon. He had finally done it. He hadn't just survived his father's shadow. He had stepped out of it by creating his own kind of light. He wasn't the legendary door kicker his father had been. He was something new, a hybrid operator, as comfortable with a Saigen tablet as he was with a rifle. He had honored the legacy not by repeating it, but by evolving it. A few days later, his cell phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Alex. It was his father's voice, not the booming admiral, but the quiet, gravelly voice of a man who knew the cost of the life his son had chosen. "Dad. Heard you made a good call, son," the admiral said. There was a long pause, filled with everything that had gone unsaid for years. "The team is everything. You protected the team. Welcome to the Brotherhood." He hung up. Alex stood there for a long time, the weight of that simple acknowledgement settling over him. It wasn't praise, it was recognition, from one operator to another. From that day on, he was no longer haunted by his name, it was just a part of who he was. His real identity had been forged in the cold Pacific surf, in the halls of a SEAL team, and in the digital ether of a Somali night. He learned that true strength wasn't just about physical endurance or blind obedience. It was about having the courage to challenge the old ways, the intelligence to see what others miss, and the unwavering conviction to protect the men standing beside you, no matter the cost. The story of Alex Ryder, and the new generation of warriors like him was just beginning a story written in code, in data, and in the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. Our story today is a powerful reminder that true honor isn't inherited, it's earned. It's about forging your own path, even when you're walking in the shadow of giants. It's proof that courage can come in many forms. Sometimes it's kicking down a door, and sometimes it's speaking truth to power, even when your voice shakes. What do you think is more important for a modern soldier? The gut instinct of a veteran or the hard data of new technology? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, please consider hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who appreciates tales of courage, and subscribing for more stories just like this. Every bit of support helps us bring these incredible journeys to light. Thank you for watching.